Okay, hello again. My name is Yashar, and this is part 4 of taking a finished drawing to a color rendering. So, in our last lesson, we addressed the trees, and I was talking about how to organize your layers in such a way that you can make a shape, and then by parenting that shape to the base shape of that tree trunk, you can then work underneath newer layers without having to destroy the previous work you've done. So that technique, and basically the technique I've been using all along throughout all of this demo, is exactly what I'm going to do in this robot too. So if you remember from the last lesson, what we did was we began by tracing with the geometric lasso tool. So I'm going to take this robot piece by piece, and I'm going to kind of break it up into chunks that my eye recognizes right away. So this, basically the head portion here, is what I'm going to address first. Going around here. This is sort of a piston that comes off the back there. These would be like the exhaust pipes in the back. So the thing kind of belches out gas as it walks along. So it's not very environment friendly. Coming around the top here, these are just plates that sort of are suspended above the robot's head. And again, once we finish tracing the shape of this robot, we will not have to worry about crafting the silhouette again. Great. So I'm going to fill it with something closer to the blues. The tree trunks are kind of a muddy green. I think I'm going to go more towards the aquas for this head here. So I'm going to make a new layer, which I haven't done yet. Scoot it up on the list and fill it. Now it's a little bright for the relative values, so I'm going to bring it down using the brightness contrast tool. About here. And now with something that's this intricate when it comes to the surface details, you can look at this robot and notice that it's made of many plates. So I have my line art underneath all of my color rendering layers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that. It's called line copy now, the duplicate layer, and I'm going to move it all the way to the top. And I'm going to turn this on and off to so I can see the shapes of all the different panels on this robot's head. And anytime I want to trace a new shape with my lasso tool, I'll turn it on, trace it, turn it off, and then fill on a new layer. But before I even do that, I want to establish my shadows. And it's good to do this especially on something like this painting where the lighting scheme is it's pretty dramatic. You know, it's predominantly dark except for that one bit of streaming light around our focal point. It's good to block out the areas in shadow that you know aren't going to receive that much light, because then you don't really have to give them as much as time. And that's just the way it should be. It's not that you're taking shortcuts. It's just that you know where to put the detail. Again, I think I mentioned before that something that's just bogged down with detail all over a painting that's way too busy is really disturbing to the eye. It actually kind of jars the viewer. You don't want to do that. So the areas that I'm blocking right now are areas that I know are not going to have as much surface detail as the rest of the head. And also what I'm doing by putting in this value is I'm saying what is further back in space and what comes forward in space. In this painting, based on our lighting scheme, things that are brighter on this robot's head are going to move forward in space. Things that are darker are going to recede. Get the eye here. Very rough, and it's okay to be this rough right now. You know, the robot is admittedly complex when it comes to the paneling system. So it's okay if you have to kind of take your time and figure out exactly what you're doing here. Light can be a tricky thing, so don't get upset if you don't get it in your first try when you're trying to render like a big mech or a robot or something that has many intricate parts, because that's sometimes the hardest thing to do when it comes to creating a lighting scheme and painting something that abides by that lighting scheme that's so complex. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and merge that. That'll be our base shape. And now referencing the line art on top, I'm going to trace one of the panels. It'll be this face plate here. All right. And I'm going to give it its own layer. Now, this panel is going to have its own shape layer, like we did with the tree trunk. And I'm going to parent things to it so that I can freely paint inside of this panel. And yeah, I'm going to have to address every panel independently on this, but I'm really going to give the most prominent panels this kind of attention. The rest don't really need it. Especially these panels around the face. I'm going to turn off the drawing behind real quick. So I'm hitting the shadows of this panel, the lower rim, or the edge. I'm going to go up to the top here. And with a new parented layer, I'm going to hit the highlights. And immediately you begin to see that it starts taking form. 3 values. Really, 3 values is basically all you really need to render most things, or to give the general idea of what kind of form they have. More values come into play generally when something is rounded or domed. But with a flat panel piece like this, 3 values really tells a lot. So flipping this on and off to make sure that I'm still, matching the line art somewhat. I don't have to match it exactly. Again, one thing that I mentioned before is it's fun for me to discover new things and experiment as I'm doing the painting itself, and not really restrict myself just to my line art. There are a lot of cool things that can happen once you get to color. So this is sort of a recessed portion of this big eye socket here. And I just put one more little value there. It's the brightest one, and it's a little glint there just to show that it really punches up that edge. And you might see me doing that a lot throughout this this robot, mainly because it's metal too. Like it really pops certain areas when you do a little glint, a little highlight like that. So if I turn on this line art again, we'll see that there's some patchwork in this metal, and I'm going to address that too. Now, the great pleasure of painting with values that already work is that just about anything, well, let me retract that. The pleasure of painting with a lighting scheme, rather, that already is working on a very simple level makes it really enjoyable to put details into your painting, because if the scheme is already working and you just abide by that scheme, you can really pack on as much detail as you want to. And again, you don't have to worry about it working, because the values are already working in other places. As long as the area on the painting that you're working on is still in that lighting scheme, go to town. That's what I'm doing with these ridges, is that I've already established my 3 values. I got my darkest dark, which means that the metal is facing downward. I have my value here, which means that that part of the metal is facing upward. And it really gives the illusion that, there's a small recessed line in this robot. And I think for painters it's really easy to get carried away with detail. Sometimes even I have to fight noodling things when I really should be focusing on the big picture. But again, all my groundwork has been done in that drawing, and it really is okay for me to noodle here. What you don't want to do is spend so much time on something that really isn't working in the first place, and give it the kind of attention and love that you would give something that really has a solid design. Not only is it, not only are you wasting your own time, but you really frustrate yourself. You create less that way. That is to say, hopefully in the end you would realize that, if you didn't have a solid design in the end, you probably shouldn't post that piece in your portfolio. And, again, it's just wasted time. So really try to identify in the early stages if something is working or if it's not, whether it's the design or if it's in the value study you do. Both of those are so crucial. Painting is, crucial in its own way. There's a way for it to be done. But painting can be done in many styles, as can drawing, but that value structure is something that you just can't create your own world of value. At least when you're painting realistically, you just don't have the freedom to do that. You can, but no one will really understand what they're looking at. That's the problem. So again, it's another recessed part of this plate. It's looking good. And I really like putting little details in this because it just gives it another layer of life. What I was talking about earlier, when you put in this much detail, is that you're kind of building a story. It's not very specific, but there is something there about this detail to be questioned or just thought about for a moment. And to think about it for a moment by the viewer is a lot more than there being nothing there to think about. So I like what's happening with this this detail in the panel. What I think I might do is kind of soften some of these edges, because again, that geometric lasso tool is really cool for hard edge shapes. Sometimes it can be just a little too hard, but really great for blocking out shapes, getting a general idea down. Kind of forces you to simplify. That's always a great thing. Less is more. You know, I could go in here with 10 values, but I'm not gonna. It's too much. Again, I keep using the word charm, but there really is a lot of charm in pulling something off with just a few values or a couple brush strokes. So one thing that I haven't done yet so far is vary the color of a surface. And I have this custom brush, which is a sponge stamp. And what I've done to it is, in the shape dynamics, I've randomized the shape for every stamp. In the scattering tab, I've scattered it up and down. In the color dynamics tab, this is the most crucial part about, or that relates to what we're about to do, is that the hue will shift left and right, as will the brightness. And when I say shift left and right, I mean on this scale here. This is the hue saturation tool. It'll go left a couple points on the hue scale, and it'll go right at random. So I'm going to select the base color of that panel again. And on a color layer, not just a normal layer, but a color layer, I'm going to run this brush across. So no real big change there. Let me brighten that up a little bit and see what happens. Still not so much. Let's brighten it up more. And let's try it on an overlay. Yeah. So color is a pretty subtle way to do it. In this case, we're going to do overlay. It has a greater effect. And you can see now there's a little more interest to that surface than what was there before. I turn it off, it's really flat, which is okay. But when I turn this on, it really looks like it's, you know, it has a history. It's been around, it's been scraped, it's been affected by the elements. And that's what we're going for. And I'm going to even shift the hue of the brush itself to extremes. And in the other dynamics panel of my brush palette, I'm going to make the opacity dependent on pen pressure. This means the harder I press, the more opaque my brush stroke is. Trying to throw in some warm colors in there as well to counter the green, this very cool green. And it's working. I like that. So, flipping the line layer back on, I'm going to collapse this panel now. Whoops. There we are. And now we have one completed panel on its own layer as a flattened element. It's nice and neat, it's organized. And on a new parented layer that's parented to that panel, I'm going to take a standard Photoshop brush, sample the brightest color on this panel, and go even a little bit higher. Kind of give this these edges a little roughness by kind of spattering, doing dots here and there. You don't need much to convey certain surface types. You can generally do it with just a couple strokes. Slight shift in value, couple strokes, really goes a long way. You can see what these dots are doing to these rims is that, you know, there are clearly little bumps and things along these surfaces. That's exactly what I want. Let's correct the shape of this this recessed area. Clean that up a little bit. Looks good. Do some more of that bumping here and there. Yeah, I think it really reads well. You know, this is only one panel of many we're going to vary the value and the color of each panel a lot as we go through and do different ones. So there will be some major differences between these panels. They won't all just be this marine color, this sort of greenish blue. Okay, and I'll call that one done. And I'll end this particular lesson here. That is just a primer and the overall technique that I'm going to apply to the rest of this robot. So let me address a couple more things and we'll get back to a different section of this robot after we've done a little bit more work. Thanks.